It's time again for Northwestern Outdoors Radio, the show covering fishing, hunting, and all sorts of outdoor recreation and destinations right here in the region you live and play in. Northwestern Outdoors is brought to you every week by Max Lure Company, makers of the world-famous wedding ring spinner, by Loophole, America's Optics Authority, and by Sportsman's Warehouse, America's premier outfitter. Northwestern Outdoors is also sponsored by Wallowa County in Northeast Oregon, where you'll find both nature and fun. By Chad's Coastwide Sports Fishing, offering you the affordable Canadian fishing trip of a lifetime. And by Camp Chef, the way to cook outdoors. So grab your fishing rod or hunting gear, load up the boat or lace up your boots, and let's head outdoors with your host, John Cruz.
It's great to be back with you again this week. Before we get into this week's edition of Northwestern Outdoors, I'd like to tell you about our new show, America Outdoors Radio. Like this show, it's an hour long, but America Outdoors Radio is sponsored by Northwest Sportsman Magazine. It's going to cover three things: fishing, hunting, and the shooting sports. It launched last week. It's airing on 19 of our current Northwestern Outdoors stations carry this show. So a lot of you are going to get 2 hours of outdoor programming every weekend. For those of you who don't have the show on your station yet, contact your station manager or programming director and let them know you want to listen to America Outdoors Radio. We'd love to be airing on your station too. Now, let's talk about this week's broadcast of Northwestern Outdoors. We're going to start off talking to David Perkins. He's a fishing guide who takes clients out for trout, steelhead, salmon, and bass throughout South Central Washington. And oh yeah, he has a very unique cast and blast experience for you too, involving not a gun, but a bow. David, the owner of Backroads Angling, has got quite the backstory too that you just have to hear about. After we talk to David, we'll talk to Lance Mers during an extended Max Minute. Lance has been doing darn well on the kokanee fishing derby circuit, and you'll hear about his exploits at the recent Lake Stevens Kokanee Derby in Northwest Washington, and also find out what lure he used for success there. From kokanee fishing, we'll transition to pike fishing. Roger Phillips with Idaho Fish and Game will tell you about fishing for these big, toothy fish in the northern Idaho Panhandle. There are quite a few lakes holding pike there, and Roger's even going to share a few ways you can catch them. I've been pike fishing myself. I've got to tell you, it is fun. We've got fishing reports for you from Potholes Reservoir in the Columbia Basin and from Wallowa County in Northeast Oregon, where a lot of good things are happening. From there, we'll be talking wildlife. In the wake of a hunter mistakenly killing an Idaho grizzly bear last month, we thought it would be a good idea to share some of the major physical differences between the two species. And then, Ron Osheim with Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks is going to share what you should do if you find what you believe to be an orphaned wild animal or bird in the field. But before we get into all of this, Matt and Tom have got a new edition of Sportsman Spotlight for you, and this week their guest is talking about walleye fishing. Sportsman Spotlight is brought to you every week by Chad's Coastwide Sports Fishing out of Port Hardy, BC. Salmon fishing forecast is off the charts this year, and the exchange rate is great too. So book your trip now by going to coastwidesportsfishing.com.
This is Sportsman Spotlight with Matt and Tom. As we chalk up another great spring salmon run, fishermen all across the West are starting to fill their nets with walleye. Here's local outdoor enthusiast Todd Smith to share a few tips on what works best for him out on the water.
You know, a lot of walleye goes on all over the place, obviously up the Columbia River. Columbia, a lot of guys are hooking out a lot of good 10, 15-pound walleye. A lot of those are getting released back because we want to make more walleye for the fishermen.
So are walleye pretty much your number one target right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now it's walleye, and most of that stuff we're catching off, crankbaits off structure and things like that. A lot of pulling just worm rigs with wedding ring setups and just dragging them across the bottom and doing really well, actually.
So you guys fishing for these in the morning, late at night? What kind of fishing patterns are you guys working with these?
Yeah, the biggest thing with the Columbia River, we're not so much worried about early morning, late afternoon. The bite changes, and of course it changes with the lunar tables and stuff, but our biggest thing is just fighting the wind, and that's when we usually do the best, is when the wind's down. When it comes to trolling worm rigs and things, slower is better, and whether it's walleye or salmon or whatever you're doing, being able to keep it at the right speed.
So Todd, what's your biggest walleye you've ever landed?
The biggest walleye I've ever caught unofficially is 18-pounder, and I put her back so she can make a lot more walleye.
Wow, heck of a catch. It's always nice to know there's still good sportsmen out there taking care of our future generations. Thanks again, Todd. You've just heard Sportsman Spotlight with Matt Rice. For more information, visit us online at sportsmanspotlight.com.
A quality and affordable fishing adventure is waiting for you off Vancouver Island with Chad's Coastwide Sports Fishing. Located in Port Hardy, British Columbia, you can drive or fly to your all-inclusive guided fishing vacation. Whether you're after big salmon, heart-fighting halibut, or a cooler full of red snapper and lingcod, you can catch it all here. Better yet, your lodging, meals, and fish processing are all taken care of. Want one more reason to go? The price. With the Canadian dollar exchange rate where it is right now, your U.S. dollar goes further. Space is limited, so go to coastwidesportsfishing.com to book your trip. That's coastwidesportsfishing.com for an incredible BC fishing adventure.
It doesn't matter what sort of adventure you're after, whether it's big game deep in the backcountry, a day of fishing out on the water, or an overnight in the great outdoors. At Sportsman's Warehouse, we've got the gear in here for what you need out there. Gear up for your next adventure at one of the Sportsman's Warehouse stores or shop online. Sportsman's Warehouse, America's premier outfitter.
From the Columbia River to Puget Sound, the Coastal Conservation Association in the Pacific Northwest works to conserve the fish we love and does so while protecting our heritage of sport fishing. To find out more, go to ccapnw.org. Again, that's ccapnw.org.
You're back with Northwestern Outdoors Radio. I'm John Cruz. It's time to talk fishing, and we're going to do it with David Perkins. He's the owner of Backroads Angling and Outfitting. He guides rivers and lakes in South Central Washington. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John.
David, you've got a real interesting backstory, one I've never heard anything similar to before, as to how you became a fishing guide. If you're willing to share that, please do.
So my background history, I was a firefighter paramedic out of college. Grew up in a fishing family, deckhanded from a very early age in Neah Bay. My brother, as soon as he graduated college, became a guide, and immediately I was his deckhand, and shortly thereafter fell into guiding with him. I left my fire job in 2007 and headed to Iraq. I ran the EMS clinics over there in southern Iraq with a company called Halliburton, and I was there just under 30 months. Decided it was time to hang it up and come back to a civilian lifestyle, and I went back to Pasco Fire. And that lasted exactly 12 months, and I was headed back to Afghanistan for another company to do another contract. 14 months into my contract, I fell out of the back of a helicopter, was injured with a traumatic brain injury. They sent me home, told me I would never be able to do my job again. I'm not a guy that easily stands still. I just didn't like that answer. So the only thing I could sell the doctors on was a business of guiding, because they thought that wasn't a stressful job. So overnight, I opened a company and started reaching out, went to a few sportsman shows. I knew a lot of people in the industry and started fishing.
Wow. And you've been doing it. This is your third season now.
This will be my third season, correct, yes.
Wow. Well, that is a very compelling story, to say the least. Thank you for your service to our communities and also to our nation. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the fishing you offer. And I guess we're going to start off by your bread and butter, Yakima River trout fishing. It's Washington State's only blue river trout stream. Tell our listeners exactly what a day on the water looks like if you're going on the Yakima.
You know, I moved to Ellensburg in 1996 to start college here and immediately fell in love with the river. It's a very simple river to fish, slow flowing. You know, I have a lot of anglers tell me, well, I've never fly fished before. And I always tell them, it's very simple. This is an easy river to learn on. You can fish it several different ways. The misnomer about the Yakima is it's a single barbless fly fishing river only, which it's a single barbless artificial lure. We do a lot of father-son trips with young people that, you know, throw small spinners to catch a trout as well. You know, the floats, they range anywhere from Rosa Dam to Easton. There's several launches, and we can do anywhere from a 4 or 5 mile float or a 16-mile float. And depending on what bugs are coming off, what time of year it is, it's an exceptional river. You know, our dry fly fishing during the summertime, we'll start at 4 a.m. on the river, and in the 4 mile section have over 100 rises of flies.
Wow.
It's pretty remarkable.
And on a typical day, a typical summer day, you know, how many nice rainbow trout are you going to catch and release?
Nice being those over 16 inches, probably a dozen, better than a dozen.
Yeah, but how many of those 10 to 15 inchers?
Oh, 40.
Yeah, exactly. It's a wonderful river, folks, but that's not the only river you're fishing during the summer months. The Klickitat, it's a river I generally fish in the fall, but you're starting in the summer. What are you targeting there?
We're targeting summer steelhead and summer salmon. It opens June 1st. It's a very finicky river with the melt off from Mount Adams with the all the particulates in the water, and so from any given day it could be in or out. But when it's in, there's several resident steelhead, and we get a fairly good run of salmon that come up through there, whether they be spring or summer, and white fishing as well.
I'll be darned. I mean, again, that was a head scratcher for me when you mentioned it, but it's nice to know there's opportunities. And folks, the Click, it's a beautiful river, some beautiful country down there, flows into the Columbia, and trust me, you will enjoy a day on either the Yakima or the Click. I presume you're fishing out of drift boats on both of these?
Drift boats and rafts, yeah. My biggest thing, and the reason I named my company what it did, is I like to get to where there's no roads. You can put in the Klickitat and float for 13 miles straight and never see a road.
Wow. I have not been to that part of the Klickitat yet. You're going to have to take me one of these days. Let's turn our attention to warm water fishing. Again, folks, this is Northwestern Outdoors Radio. We're talking to David Perkins. He's the owner of Backroads Angling and Outfitting. The Yakima River, the lower section of the Yakima, it's a great smallmouth bass fishery, and most people don't know anything about it.
You know, from the time I was 5 years old and had a pedal bike, I was born and raised in West Richland in the Tri-Cities. From that very time, I would take literally my bike and my rods and go down and catch smallmouth bass. Never in my life did I think it would turn into a career and a way to make money. But you're right, absolutely. From Horn Rapids down, even above that, up into Kiona and Benton City, I primarily focused from Wannawish Dam down to the mouth. On any given date in the summer, it's not uncommon to have a 100-fish day.
Now, I've got to ask you, are these John Day smallmouth where 96 of them are going to be 7 inches or less, or are we talking about some bigger ones?
You know, the big fish come early in May and June during the spawn. On the average, let's say a month in July, a trip would probably bring about 20 fish over 16 inches and a few that are in the 4 or 5 pound range. The majority of it would be that same, that 12-inch fish.
Nothing wrong with that. That's a fun day of fishing as far as I'm concerned. Now, if folks want to go after other warm water fish, I understand you have access to a private lake. What are folks going to catch there?
I do. I have a lease on 9 lakes down in the basin just south of Othello.
Nice.
And we focus on largemouth bass. There's white and black crappie, bluegill, a little bit of walleye. And on the average down there on a day, last week I took a client who caught 76 largemouth in 4 hours.
Oh, my gosh. That's incredible. But,
average size being 2 to 3 pounds, 4 or 5 a day of being 5 to 6 pound range.
How big, this is going to sound like a silly question, but I love crappie and bluegill fishing, especially when I got kids with me. How big are the crappie and bluegill in those lakes?
It's amazing. I actually took my wife and her 2 children down to there last year. In 5 hours, they landed 76 fish, and probably 30 of those were white crappie, and they averaged a pound or better apiece.
Oh my gosh. Most people would not pay for a guided crappie trip here in the Northwest, but I would pay for something like that. That sounds like an incredible experience, but you top it off with something even better. Not only can you fish on these private lakes, you've got kind of a cast and blast deal, and this is not a cast and blast where you're going after upland birds or pheasants. Tell our listeners about this option.
So the lakes are all full of carp, and I thought to myself one day, why not start shooting these carp? People would pay for that. And I literally, as soon as I bought the bows and the equipment to do that, the first trip I took, we fished in the morning, had our morning bite, there are things. We cooked lunch on the lakeside, went out and shot carp, and for the evening bite, I said, okay, guys, it's time to hang up the bows and go back to fishing. They didn't want to give them up. Out of four clients, 2 boats, none of them had ever shot a bow. It all killed carp that day, and they loved it, and they were thrilled, and they wanted to keep doing it.
That's what I was going to ask. I haven't done this yet myself. The learning curve, is it difficult to learn how to do this and do it well?
I would say about 15, 20 minutes of practicing your shooting, fire a few shots at the fish, and you'll understand exactly where you need to aim.
Wow. All right. Lots of fun that you offer on the water. Let's give folks a website and a telephone number so they can book a trip, whether it's for salmon or trout or bass or crappie or shooting some carp.
So the website is backroadsangling.com, and my cell phone is 509-554-2790.
Again, that's 509-554-2790 or backroadsangling.com. Backroadsangling.com. Go ahead and book a trip with David Perkins, the owner of Backroads Angling and Outfitting. Sounds like you're going to have a blast. David, thanks for sharing this with us on Northwestern Outdoors Radio.
Thanks, John.
Oh, honey, it sure is a beautiful day to be out on the water.
It sure is. And you know what? I've got something special for you today.
You do?
Yep. It's a wedding ring. It's gold, it's pretty, and it hangs on and won't let go.
Oh my gosh, honey, I love you.
I love you too, babe. Here you go.
But that's a fishing lure.
Well, of course it is. It's a Max wedding ring spinner. It's been catching trout, kokanee, walleye, and panfish since 1969. What did you think it was?
I thought it was a wedding ring.
Oh.
Max Wedding Ring Spinner. It's a great lure, but maybe they should have named it something else. Look for it wherever you buy sporting goods.
You jerk!
Leupold Gold Ring Optics are built to perform at the highest level, shot after shot, year after year. Our rifle scopes, binoculars, spotting scopes, rangefinders, and more always come through when you need them most. That's why our American-built products have a lifetime guarantee. Or as we like to say here at Leupold, they are guaranteed for a lifetime of performance, not a lifetime of replacement. Find out more about our top quality gear and our lifetime guarantee at leupold.com. Leupold, America's optics authority.
Backcountry hunters and anglers, the men and women working hard to keep public lands in public hands. Check us out at backcountryhunters.org.
You're back with more of the great outdoors on Northwestern Outdoors Radio with John Cruz.
It's time for another Max Minute.
Fish on!
Brought to you every week by Max Lure Company. With us again is Lance Mers. Lance, understand that you did pretty well fishing the Lake Stevens Kokanee Derby. Tell me more about that experience.
Oh, it was a great time, John. You know, anytime you get out fishing, whether it's a derby or a tournament or whatever, it's a good day of fishing. And, you know, that Lake Stevens Derby, it's a fun time to get together with people that like the kokanee fish.
All right, well, you said the nice stuff, but let's talk about how well you actually did. How many fish did your boat catch, and did you walk away with any money?
I was fishing with a great fisherman named John Kernigan, and we ended up limiting out our boat by 8 o'clock in the morning. And I ended up winning first place for the heaviest trout for the entire derby.
Wow. So I know quite a few people who fished that derby this year, and a lot of people struggled. So A, limiting out. Congratulations on that. And B, how big was that trout?
The trout was just over 1.5 pounds. I mean, it was a dandy trout. Came out of the water splish splashing and trying to take a bath, but he got a bath in the middle of our boat.
All right, so the next question is this. What lure were you using for success?
Well, we were mainly using wedding rings, but we started playing around and we started using the Max Lure Kokanee Killer, which was a killer.
All right, tell me a little bit more about that lure.
Well, it looks like a wedding ring. It acts like a wedding ring, but the difference is that there's a glow hook on it, and the glow hooks are handcrafted in hard plastic. Now when you dip those, you can charge them in the sun or you can charge them with a light, and they'll keep their charge for about 30 minutes. But the fish really get attracted to those, and they come in different colors, 3 different colors and 3 different sizes, but there's about 10 things to choose from too.
All right. Well, there you go, folks. The Kokanee Killer looks like it was killing the kokanee on Lake Stevens. It'll probably work at a lake near you as well. That wraps up our Max Minute with Max Lure Company. Hey, we're talking to Lance Mers today with Max Lure Company about a brand new lure that's just slaying the trout out there on area lakes. It's the Smile Blade Spin Drift Trout Lure from Max Lure Company. Lance, what makes this lure so special?
Well, we've got our Max Lure patented Smile Blade, our high UV components, and the Spin Drift hook, which gives it a great corkscrew action in the water.
There you go, folks. All 3 components help you catch more fish. The Smile Blade Spin Drift Trout Lure, only from Max Lure Company.
Looking for a quality fishing adventure that won't break the bank? Then head to Canada for an all-inclusive fishing vacation with Chad's Coastwide Sports Fishing. Big salmon, halibut, snapper, and lingcod are waiting for you off Vancouver Island. But space is limited, so book now at coastwidesportsfishing.com. That's coastwidesportsfishing.com.
Want to earn a serious reward? You can, and all you need is a fishing rod. There's money to be made catching northern pike minnow. There's too many of them in the Columbia and Snake Rivers, and we'll pay you cash to catch them. Pike minnow eat our salmon and steelhead, and that's no good. The season starts May 1st, runs through September, and the more fish you catch, the more you earn. How much money can you make from this program? Well, last year, one angler earned a cool $100,000. Find out more at pikeminnow.org. That's pikeminnow.org. Go ahead, collect your reward.
With an Evinrude motor and Minn Kota troller and Lowrance fish finder or two. We pushed off the dock just before 5 o'clock.
You're back with Northwestern Outdoors Radio. I'm John Cruz, and we're going to talk about fishing for a whole different species of fish, one that we don't talk about too often, northern pike. There's apparently quite a few of them to be caught in northern Idaho. With us here to tell us more about it, Roger Phillips with Idaho Fish and Game. Roger, great to have you back on the show.
Thanks, John. Good to be here.
Well, Roger, last time we chatted, we were talking about perch out of Cascade Lake, but you issued a press release about northern pike fishing in basically the Panhandle. Very intriguing to me. I've only been pike fishing once before in the Northwest Territories, but I absolutely loved it. Question for you, though. When it comes to northern pike, I know in Washington State, fisheries managers don't want those anywhere near the Columbia River. They're very afraid of what's going to happen if they become established. They've been very aggressive keeping them out. What's Idaho's stance on the northern pike?
Well, we're kind of taking a maintain what we currently have, and if they're creating problems in some area, we're not shy about going in and removing them. But in the most part, we've kind of reached some stability in our waters where we have pretty high angler take of these things in the 30 to 40% range, and that keeps those populations in check. And they've been in those North Idaho waters since the 1970s. They were illegally introduced, and because of that, we don't have any special regulations on them. There is no size, there's no bag limit, but the population itself, for lack of a better word, kind of tends to be minding its manners. So we're leaving them as a game fish.
Okay, well, that's more than fair. And again, folks, if you've never seen a northern pike before, their nickname is the water wolf because they are a truly vicious looking and very toothy creature. And I understand that the state record in Idaho is nearly 40 pounds?
Yeah, and that was taken out of Hayden Lake. And interestingly, in the last couple of years, when they've been doing gillnet surveys, they pulled in at least one that is similar in size to that one. So there are still some real big ones out there, and Coeur d'Alene Lake frequently has fish in the 20-pound range. So we do grow some pretty big ones, but I think the majority of the fishery is on kind of those mid-sized ones that people catch incidental to other things, and people also target them as well.
Well, I know that they're actively targeted on Lake Coeur d'Alene. Quite a few people like to head out there. And there's 23 bodies of water total in the Idaho Panhandle where you can find pike. What are some of the more popular fisheries?
Those Coeur d'Alene Lake is definitely a big one. There's a very interesting fishery there in the spring. I've yet to witness it firsthand, but folks go out in the evenings and line up on the beach and just throw out a bobber, and I guess smelt is the favorite bait, and just wait. And, I always think of them being really aggressive fish that you're going after with lures and things like that, but that's a really popular fishery, and they take some really big fish. And then I know the Coeur d'Alene chain lakes have them, and Hayden Lake has them, and, the folks seem to enjoy going after them.
Now, I also understand you don't need, it's not like walleye, it's not like salmon. You don't need a big fancy boat to go after pike. I mean, you can do it from a canoe, a kayak, even a float tube.
Yeah, absolutely, especially in those chain lakes, because those are fairly small and manageable for, almost any size boat. And I think that's realistic for a person who wants to kind of get their feet wet in there, go out in kind of a small boat in some of these smaller lakes and just look in the obviously fishy places, off those points and drop-offs and things like that, and just give it a try and see what happens. And if you don't catch a pike, there's a good chance you'll catch a largemouth or something else.
You're listening to Northwestern Outdoors Radio. We're talking to Roger Phillips about pike fishing in the Idaho Panhandle. So we've established some of the places where you can find them, and at least one tactic for catching them. When I was up in the Northwest Territories, I was that guy throwing a 5-a-diamond spoon or a daredevil spoon or crocodile spoons or even, working the weed beds with one of the old Johnson Silver minnows, if you remember those lures, the weedless ones.
Yeah.
What are some of the other things that people do to catch pike?
Well, I know folks use some plastics in kind of minnow patterns. Anything that imitates a small fish, obviously, they're going to go after. But, I'm kind of with you. I don't try to reinvent the wheel when I'm first getting started. I go to some of those tried and true classics and then, kind of branch out from there.
Well, and folks, by the way, when it comes to the size of lure, just think big. Even the smaller pike are going to just nail these things. They put up a fun fight, and again, they're just you can actually quite often watch them come after the lure and make that strike, and you got a real tussle on your hands, especially with the big pike. And there's another tactic that I've heard about, and it applies to muskie primarily, but I've also seen this with pike, that they'll follow it right up to the boat, but they won't strike, and they tell you to do a figure eight with your lure. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I have, and I think that would be a really fun way to do it, but I don't know if I'd have the nerve. I tend to, as soon as I see a fish coming, I tend to set the hook when it's still 2 feet behind it.
I know. I've had that problem with lots of fish, especially bass, so I know how that goes. So, these chain lakes, I want to go ahead and stray just a little bit here, because these, A, they're beautiful lakes up there in the Panhandle, but B, they support quite a few other fisheries besides northern pike.
Yeah, absolutely. And, each one kind of has a little bit different thing, but they have a lot of things in common. And I think that would be multiple species that you can fish for. And they're called the chain lakes for a reason. They're all kind of attached to that Coeur d'Alene River, and they're all in a very condensed area. And so, I think it would just be a really fun place to spend a long weekend. Just, try one for a while. And if it doesn't work, jump to the next one. Or even if it does work, jump to the next one, because it's just, a nice variety of waters up there and a few places to camp, and just a beautiful place to be.
Oh, absolutely. You are right about that. So, Roger, we've talked about Hayden Lake, the Chain Lakes. We've talked about Coeur d'Alene Lake. There's some other big bodies of water up there for people who do have those bigger boats. Any suggestions?
Well, I like to call those the Great Lakes of Idaho, because they're spectacular. And Pend Oreille, we've talked about this in the past, our kokanee fishery has really bounced back there and is providing a lot of really great fishing opportunity, and people just love catching those kokanee. And then nearby Priest Lake has a good lake trout population and a popular lake trout fishery there. And what's fascinating about that one, I have had a chance to do it, is people think about those lake trout, often they think, big downriggers and complicated rigs and expensive setups, but we were out there with young minnows and just bouncing them off the bottom in about 200 feet and caught, a nice batch of lake trout.
Wow.
And so that's one that, another one, if folks want to try a kind of a different fishery, and it doesn't require anything specialized. You need a depth finder and then bounce some of that stuff off the bottom and see what happens, and good chance of catching a lake trout.
All right. Well, there you go, folks. Head on up to the Panhandle of northern Idaho. A, you can get in some pike, which is a really unusual fish for most of us here in the Northwest. And B, you can get all sorts of other fish too. And again, the lake trout in Priest Lake, a beautiful place to recreate. I remember doing a 50-miler canoe trip as a kid there, and still have fond memories, and I would love to catch a laker there. Roger, is there a website we can send people to find out more about fishing the Panhandle?
Yeah, go to the Fish and Game website at fishandgame.idaho.gov and go to our fish planner, and you can find out all kinds of information about the different bodies of water up there and what kind of fish they have and the regulations. And it's very user-friendly. You just plug in the name of a lake that you're interested in, and it will give you all the information you need about it.
Well, there you go, folks. Head on to that Fish and Game website, check out the fish planner, and make your plans to fish the Idaho Panhandle. Roger, thanks for telling us all about this on Northwestern Outdoors Radio.
Thank you, John. Take care.
Figure eights with musky spinners and lures. Oh, honey, I love you, and that's not a lie. Musky guides all tell the truth. This must be the reason why I miss fishing more than I miss you.
Want to earn a serious reward? You can, and all you need is a fishing rod. There's money to be made catching northern pike minnow. There's too many of them in the Columbia and Snake Rivers, and we'll pay you cash to catch them. Pike minnow eat our salmon and steelhead, and that's no good. The season starts May 1st, runs through September, and the more fish you catch, the more you earn. How much money can you make from this program? Well, last year, one angler earned a cool $100,000. Find out more at pikeminnow.org. That's pikeminnow.org. Go ahead, collect your reward.
You demand quality performance from your binoculars, whether you use them in the field, on the water, or at a stadium. But you don't want to spend a fortune. That's where the BX Mackenzie binoculars from Leupold come in. These armored, waterproof binoculars are both comfortable and dependable. Look for your Mackenzie binoculars at quality sporting goods retailers near you, to include your Cabela's, Sportsman's Warehouse, or Northwest Bi-Mart stores. VX Mackenzie, bringing your world into sharper focus, only from Leupold.
Welcome back to Northwestern Outdoors Radio. It's time for news and reports from the field. Let's go ahead and start off with a fishing report from our old friends at Mardon Resort. Rod Harbin, who works the store there and knows quite a bit about fishing, Potholes Reservoir in eastern Washington, says the walleye fishing has been fantastic, especially near Crab Creek and the power lines and off the big dunes at the north end of the reservoir there. The bass are also biting. They're biting around Goose Island, and they're biting off of O'Sullivan Dam, and they're even starting to catch some of those crappie and perch off the docks, especially in the morning. Find out more about fishing Potholes Reservoir by dropping in the store at Mardon Resort, and consider a stay there as well. It's a wonderful place to be. I love that place in the summer. Heck, I love that place any time of year. Find out more at mardonresort.com. That's mardonresort.com, where the fish bite, but we don't. We've also got some fishing reports from Wallowa County in northeast Oregon. 2 rivers previously closed part of the year are now open all year. One of them is the Amnaha River. It's been high, been tough to fish, but I think once that drops into shape, it's going to be pretty good trout fishing there. And one place where the fishing's already very good is the Wallowa River. I got to fish that near Minham last October. I'll tell you what, this is a fun stream to fish. It's a great walk and wade stream. It's a great stream to fish from a raft, and there's lots of trout in there. Reports are from Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife that the catching is very, very good right now, with trout being caught up to 18 inches, and fly anglers will appreciate caddis hatch that has been going off lately. And if you're in Wallowa County, don't forget to fish Wallowa Lake. The trout fishing is pretty good. The lake was recently stocked. And better still, the kokanee fishing is coming back. As many of you know, a world record kokanee was caught out of here around 2009. But not long after that, well, the fishing crashed for kokanee. The kokanee became very small in size. Lots of kokanee, but they were all small. Well, the good news is, the size is increasing. Lots of 8 to 9 inch kokanee and kokanee up to 12 inches. So we are on an upswing there for kokanee. Don't be surprised if the good times come back for big kokanee in Wallowa Lake very soon. Turning our attention to news. I got an email from Greg Lisinski with Idaho Fish and Game the other day. Turns out a father and son from California were hunting for black bear near the Continental Divide last month, not far from Henry's Lake, and they mistakenly shot and killed a 9-year-old male grizzly bear. To their credit, when they realized they killed an animal listed as endangered, they did call Idaho Fish and Game, and they took their lumps, with the father receiving a citation and the 15-year-old son given a warning. The upshot of this story is that spring and fall bear hunters alike need to know the differences between the two bear species, especially in places like Idaho and Montana, and even in the North Cascades of Washington State, where you can run into both types of bear. One, the black bear you can shoot. The other, the grizzly, you cannot. Here's a quick primer. First off, black bears are not always black. They can be brown like a grizzly, so don't rely on color. Instead, look at the body. The grizzly bear has a noticeable shoulder hump that the black bear does not. The ears are different too. Black bears have pointy ears, and grizzlies have short, rounded ears. The claws on a grizzly are about twice as long as a black bear's, and the black bear has a straight face compared to the dish-shaped face of a grizzly bear. The bottom line is this, though. If you're not sure, don't pull the trigger. You'll never forgive yourself if you do and you're wrong, and the fines and possible jail time that will come out of the mistake won't be any fun either. Next up on Northwestern Outdoors Radio, we're talking with Ron Osheim with Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks about the problems that wildlife agencies around the Northwest are having right now with folks who are quote-unquote rescuing quote-unquote abandoned animals. Ron, tell me more about this.
Well, John, I think, as we all know, there's just tremendous passion for wildlife in Montana, and particularly for young wildlife. And occasionally we'll get a well-intended individual that'll bring in a fawn or a calf that assumes that it's been abandoned, and typically that's not the case. And once we get those, first thing we do is ask the folks to return it to where they picked it up, because typically the mother is close by or has just gone to do some feeding. Otherwise, we don't have any choice in a lot of cases, but to euthanize the animals, because we cannot move deer and elk calves because of disease issues, and that's really the biggest concern. Best thing to do is, as we say, if you care, leave them there.
All right. And, this has come to the forefront with a recent incident in Yellowstone National Park where two well-intentioned but absolutely idiotic tourists decided that a baby bison was cold and they had to put it in a car and drive it to the ranger station where they demanded that somebody help the cold baby bison.
Yeah.
Not much else you can say to that except that...
I think, John, it's just, again, it points to the kind of compassion that people have for wildlife, and in particular young wildlife. And those were out-of-state folks, certainly, that didn't really understand some of the implications. I feel for the Park Service, because they got put in a real awkward position there, and I know the wrath of the people came down on them because they ultimately had to dispatch that young bison. But, again, it just points to the reason that you need to leave those young animals where they are, and that's the best thing for them, because really, John, in most cases, nature will take its course the way it ought to, which is the mother will typically come back, or some of those animals are going to die. And our options are, with some critters, maybe you could find a zoo that would take one, or to euthanize them, because we just don't have places to put those in a lot of cases. Zoos are full of animals. We do not rehab deer and elk, as I said, or moose, because of real concerns with disease. And people have a hard time understanding that. We understand that. Again, we look at the chance of survival if left in the wild, and with rehabilitation, assuming we would accept the animal, potential for return to the wild, potential problems with disease, options other than return to the wild, and then I think realistically you have to look at staff time involved. You've got animal populations out there, large populations that we manage, and how much time and effort do you spend on individuals? And that sounds a little bit maybe barbaric, but it's something we have to consider. Nope. We don't have unlimited staff time and resources either, but people don't get into the business we're in to euthanize animals, so it's a tough line.
I would imagine somewhere out there right now as we're speaking, there's somebody that has, we'll say, a fawn or a calf, and they're thinking, well, I guess I know not to take it to Fish and Wildlife because they're going to euthanize it. I'll just raise this animal myself. What's your thought about that?
Well, first, it's against the law. Folks can't do that, and ultimately that animal is going to have to be moved out of those people's possession. Even if they can keep that from officials, what do you do with it? When deer and elk get larger, they can become a risk, physical harm for the individual. We've had instances where tame, essentially habituated animals have kicked somebody, bitten somebody, that sort of thing. But again, the bottom line, John, it's against the law. Right. For individuals that don't have permits or licenses to rehab or to hold animals.
So, leave it alone, leave it there. The parents are probably close by, and that orphaned animal is probably not orphaned. You can't raise them yourself. Fish and Game really doesn't want them because you don't have too many options on what to do there. One other thing we need to talk about, though, is people with dogs. I mean, I know sometimes dogs that are off-leash can cause some real problems for young wildlife.
Right, and before we leave that other topic, John, I don't want to make folks think that we don't accept any animals. We do accept bears, both black and grizzly bears, birds, and in some other instances we'll accept other animals that we will place in zoos or those sorts of places. But the only animals that we really can rehabilitate for release are bears, black bears and grizzly bears, and birds. But back to dogs, yeah, that's typically... We get a few calls from folks where a dog has chased a young animal and perhaps injured it to an extent that it can't be saved. I think people understand that, and it's unintentional. But if you're in a place where you're potentially going to encounter a young wildlife, young deer, young elk, you do need to keep your dog under control, because there's some instinct in some dogs to pursue, and that can result in a bad outcome.
Well, there you go. So keep your dogs under control. Number 2, if you do find an orphaned animal, it's probably not. Leave it there. If you're absolutely certain it's orphaned and it's a bear, or whether it's a black bear or a grizzly or maybe a raptor, then go ahead and contact Fish and Game because they might be able to help out there. Anything else you want to add before we go, Ron?
No, I think that's well said, John. If you're absolutely sure, get a hold of one of our people, and we'll work with you to do what hopefully is best for all interests.
All right. Ron, thanks as always. Always appreciate your information on Northwestern Outdoors Radio.
Thank you.
The
road is calling you to experience one of Oregon's 7 wonders, the Wallowas. So grab your camping equipment and fishing gear and head out to Northeast Oregon, where you'll find the views are endless, the air crisp and clean, and the water's cold and clear. Set up camp by the shores of Wallowa Lake or in the heart of the Wallowa-Whitman National Forest. Take your fishing gear and cast your bait into the deep waters of Wallowa Lake, or roll your fly into one of the eddies of the many freestone creeks and rivers teeming with fish. This summer, take the road that leads to wonders. It begins at WallowaCountyChamber.com.
This is the time of year to get out and cook out. So make your next meal sizzle with Camp Chef, the brand known for quality outdoor cooking. From camp stoves to cast iron, from smokers to grills, Camp Chef will change the way you cook outdoors. To eat like a king on your next adventure, go to campchef.com or visit your local sporting goods store and get cooking. Whether you're serving breakfast in the backcountry or barbecue on the back patio, savor the simplicity with Camp Chef. Camp Chef, the way to cook outdoors.
Leupold Gold Ring Optics are built to perform at the highest level, shot after shot, year after year. Our rifle scopes, binoculars, spotting scopes, rangefinders, and more always come through when you need them most. That's why our American-built products have a lifetime guarantee. Or as we like to say here at Leupold, they are guaranteed for a lifetime of performance, not a lifetime of replacement. Find out more about our top quality gear and our lifetime guarantee at Leupold.com. Leupold, America's optics authority.
It doesn't matter what sort of adventure you're after. Whether it's big game deep in the backcountry, a day of fishing out in the water, or an overnight in the great outdoors. At Sportsman's Warehouse, we've got the gear in here for what you need out there. Gear up for your next adventure at one of the Sportsman's Warehouse stores or shop online. Sportsman's Warehouse, America's premier outfitter.
One more time this week for Northwestern Outdoors Radio with John Cruz.
It's a free fishing weekend if you're a Washington resident and if you're a Saturday listener. Today, June 11th, is a free fishing day, and there's several events taking place in eastern Idaho I want to tell you about. One of them is taking place at the Port Neuf Wellness Complex in Pocatello. Idaho Fish and Game's Take Me Fishing trailer is going to be there, and there's going to be an opportunity to catch fish out of a pond there. Another place where you can get a 2-fish limit is at the Grace Fish Hatchery in Grace. As a matter of fact, there's going to be some pretty big fish there. Anglers aged 14 and younger are welcome to participate. And at Upper Kelly Park Pond in Soda Springs, they've got another event for the kids, aged 13 and younger. On this one, there's a 3-fish limit. Now, you have to walk quarter mile to get there from the Kelly Park parking lot. Sounds like a lot of fun on Free Fishing Day in eastern Idaho. Meanwhile, in Oregon, archery aficionados will be interested in a couple of free seminars taking place at Sportsman's Warehouse stores to include a preseason compound bow check at the Bend store. That's taking place for you Saturday listeners from 1 to 3 p.m., and next Saturday, June 18th, at the Klamath Falls Sportsman's Warehouse, there's a bow setup and arrow selection hunting seminar. These are free. And now, let's get to your trivia question of the week. A lot of people don't know there are 2 species of stinky skunks found here in the Northwest. The most common is the striped skunk, you know, the one played by Pepe Le Pew in those old Looney Tunes cartoons. The other one, though, is found in all 5 of the western states we broadcast in, and I assure you, it can stink just as bad, if not worse, than its striped cousin. What is the name of this second skunk species? Give us your guess through our Facebook page at Northwestern Outdoors Radio. Just like our page, look for the post, give us your guess there, or go to our website at northwesternoutdoors.com. Go to the Contact Us page and give us your guess that way. Somebody who guesses right is going to win the $25 gift card we give away every week from Sportsman's Warehouse. If you get a chance, tune in to our new hour-long show, America Outdoors Radio. It's sponsored by Northwest Sportsman Magazine. It's airing on 21 stations, and you can find one near you at our website for this show, AmericaOutdoorsRadio.com. Another website to check is RenoViolaOutdoors.com. That's the home of WRVO Radio. You'll hear America Outdoors Radio there several times every Friday, and this show, Northwestern Outdoors, several times on Wednesdays. The website again, RenoViolaOutdoors.com, the home of WRVO Radio. That's all for this week. I hope you'll get out there for your free fishing day or for some other adventure. Until next time, take care, God bless, and make it a point to spend some time outdoors.